Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, Jake Gyllenhaal is a sociopathic news photographer in Nightcrawler. The Ouija board wreaks havoc for our latest horror film. Keanu Reeves seeks out revenge for his dead dog in John Wick. And our home media moment is the HBO film The Normal Heart. Our triple feature of older films is Cloud Atlas, my pick for old classic Horrible Bosses, and the Oscar-nominated film Anna. The decade is nearly half over, so in honor of Horrible Bosses, we start our look back at the best of the past 5 years with our top 5 comedies from 2010 on. First up, though, we need to talk about a re-release that kind of came and went, the 10th anniversary of Saw. It opened with less than $1 million in ticket sales on more than 2,000 screens, one of the biggest bombs of not only the year, but really of all time. So let's all just sort of give some brief reviews of the film and then discuss a little bit about maybe what went wrong with the re-release. Joe, let's start with you.
Well, Saw, here's my synopsis. Jigsaw kills people by kidnapping them, putting them in traps, and giving them a means to escape in a hope to make them appreciate life more, as his victims usually are pretty flawed themselves, being anything from criminals, addicts, doctors, policemen, and hardworking husbands. Yeah, that whole shtick is kind of a lie. The first movie is easily the best, with the director having a cool concept to work with, and really not much of a budget, so it's actually kind of impressive. The series progresses into a lot of a mixed bag, but it does kind of delve into torture porn, honestly. Still, Saw itself as the first film is providing a fairly scary villain, and the traps are a unique hook, with some good gore and a decent twist, though it's actually kind of dumb when you really think about it, but still cool in a ridiculous sort of way. Going off my memory, because it's actually been a long time since I've seen it, I give it a B+. In terms of why it didn't work, I'm a little surprised, because I know it does have a pretty big following. But then again, since the last sequel came out not too long ago, maybe people have gotten enough of Saw. And from what I understand, it was advertised as being released in 3D, but then it wasn't.
I believe, and I'm not the only one, that thought it was going to be in 3D from the initial marketing.
Because I remember seeing that marketed as 3D. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that would have helped, but I'd imagine if word got out that it wasn't in 3D, what's the point of seeing this movie that has been around for 10 years? And I guess maybe it just doesn't have as big a cult following as people thought it did. Right. I will admit, I'm surprised it did that badly.
Yes, it did extremely poorly. For me, this is a movie and really a whole series that never interested me in the least. I only saw it for the first time yesterday, so I could participate in the discussion about it. This type of gory horror does not typically appeal to me. Now, I do have to say the mystery component was good. The twists at the end were pretty decent. I honestly don't understand what people love about a movie like this, other than maybe the mystery element. The graphic torture scenes are stomach-turning, and I have to imagine get worse with each sequel, as that's the goal of most sequels, do everything, from the first movie bigger, push the envelope more.
You're pretty correct.
I was intrigued by the story, though, but I have no desire to see it again or ever watch any of the future installments. I'll give it a B for a good mystery component, and if people are into this, obviously it's, sort of set the groundwork for movies that followed, but...
Interestingly, it's also one of the last big Danny Glover movies.
Yes, I didn't realize Danny Glover was in it.
A lot of people forget that.
Yeah, that was pretty exciting. Justin, let's hear from you about a review of Saw first.
Okay. Well, much like you, Joe, I have a lot of respect for the original Saw. It did a lot on a really minuscule budget. It relied completely on close sets and really found these awesome ways to incorporate these really fast-paced editing shots and really do so much with so little. I think it worked in a big way, and I feel like people don't really give Saw enough credit for that and always dismiss it as torture porn, which honestly kind of bugs me. Acting-wise, I thought it was fairly solid. It's probably one of the better acted horror films I've seen in about a decade, so, I can't fault it there.
It's actually pretty impressive you say that, because most of the cast is made up of non-actors.
Save Carrie Elwes and Danny Glover, yeah.
But really, most of the main cast, literally, were amateurs.
Honestly, I think it does a lot with a little. I feel like it really did set the stage for things to come. Obviously, James Wan has gone nowhere but up since it started. Much like you, Joe, I'd probably give it a B+. But to get to the question of why didn't this work, let's take a look at all the re-releases that have come out in recent years. Lion King, Ghostbusters, Beauty and the Beast, Jurassic Park. All these movies have been out for a long time and have massive followings that still are. Saw kind of does. Its following's kind of dwindling, though. I feel like the deeper the mythology got, the more people kind of, like...
drew away from it?
Exactly. I didn't hear about the 3D bit. I think it would be ridiculous because there's nothing in the movie that screams 3D at all. Not the first
but
one.
what's the point otherwise? I think it didn't work because it didn't give the audience anything. All those titles you mentioned are movies to take the family to, take the kids to. Oh, you've never seen Jurassic Park on a big screen, Tommy, let's go.
Yeah.
The fans of this movie either already own it, downloaded it illegally, or, whatever, or watch it on TV, when it comes on HBO. I don't see a point if they don't make it in 3D, or... the big Blu-ray box of all of them just came out. Give everybody that buys a ticket, hey, here's a $5 off coupon for the box set,
Yeah,
some sort of
something.
incentive.
That's actually a good point, though. I think that marketing was a big problem because you're right, it has to be something special because it's really much more of a niche thing. Mm-hmm. Actually, like if probably shouldn't have had such a wide release.
Right.
It's kind of like Dune, which we probably watch in the near future. If that was to be released, probably shouldn't do like a wide release, but have like specific locations for it, build it up over time, specifically for the fans. Because the comparison between Saw and something like Ghostbusters or Lion King, we've got fairly family-friendly movies that most people can enjoy versus
Saw.
Violent, dark, specific audience.
Like some of the hardest R you could get.
So it's not the same. And maybe that's what they were thinking they could follow up. They thought there was too broad of an audience for it. You're right, really.
Yeah. Well, in any event, it sold on an average less than 35 tickets per theater for the whole weekend.
That is horrible.
And our theater, much less than that, actually, probably about 20.
That's
so.
I mean, I'd say that's sad, but it's Saw.
I didn't understand the whole mentality behind it, honestly.
Well, Saw had its time.
It did, but I think you said it best. The longer we spent on it, the more I think it wore out its welcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, well, let's get to the actual new releases of the week, and we start with Nightcrawler, and that's going to be with Justin.
Lou Bloom, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, is a man fiercely determined to make a living and a name for himself when he decides to use the little money he has left to buy a camcorder and radio scanner to film disturbing crime scenes. Though when his footage gets praised and picked up by a news director named Nina, played by Rene Russo, Lou, quote, hires Rick, played by Riz Ahmed, to his growing, quote, business to give them the most gruesome footage they can find. A couple of weeks ago in my visual media class for grad school, I posed a question about whether or not things have gotten better or worse since the years of sensational storytelling in journalism. The general consensus? Significantly worse. And if that is not a testament to the prominence of Nightcrawler, I honestly don't know what is. To start, this is not an easy watch by any stretch of the word. Gyllenhaal is about as slimy as it gets, and the film goes above and well beyond the Call of Duty to satirize just how cutthroat the news world has become. Though while director Dan Gilroy's story tries to be smarter than it thinks it is at times, drawing a bit of a parallel to Natural Born Killers, this ugly take on the world definitely has its place. The imagery is sickening yet disturbingly authentic. Gyllenhaal's seductive charisma begs for even more discussion about 21st century news and has one of the most suspenseful car chases in recent years. Like Natural Born Killers, I'm not entirely sure how poignant Nightcrawler will be in a few years, but for now it's a brilliantly ugly commentary on the media world with just a couple issues, and I give it a B+.
Yeah, this is an odd one for me. It's got a really interesting look, an intensely entertaining story, and Gyllenhaal kills the role, like he usually does, no surprise. Yeah, obviously. But the character is such a sociopath and continues to get worse as we go. By the end of the movie, I just felt so icky. He is not sympathetic at all, and neither is what he's doing or who he's doing it for, Rene Russo's character. And I do like the commentary on the state of TV news today, and it's kind of sad that it isn't too far from the truth, if not right on the money. So for that and the other good things about it, I give it a B, but
it's heavy.
Just yuck. Yeah, like I didn't feel any time in that movie that I was enjoying watching it, as good as it might be. Joe?
Well, I am surprised, but I completely understand what you're talking about, though. Rene Russo actually took a 6-year break from acting, and this is one of the first big roles she's had since she came out. And did you guys know she's 60?
I always
Holy
thought
cow.
she looked great.
She doesn't age
Yeah.
at all.
Even when Tin Cup was out, she was in her mid to late 40s, and I thought she looked like she was 30. I mean, she's always looked great.
I was looking this up for the review, and I just was surprised. Like, wow.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, just a great comeback as usual.
Mm-hmm.
A Nightcrawler. Well, let's start off. I mean, there's some great performances here, most notably from Gyllenhaal and Russo. He plays such a really complicated character, and this film is kind of aligning with the whole cinematography of what it's based around with news itself. It's really well shot. There is a really unique story that I think is kind of a gritty commentary on the news today. You do get to see Bill Paxton, which is always a plus, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But Gyllenhaal really steals the show. He's so infecting with his charisma, and ultimately becomes really frightening. For much of the movie, you actually want him to succeed. You start off thinking he is sympathetic. This movie is in part a thriller, but in a lot of ways, it's really kind of a dark, dark comedy. Not only is it a complicated character study, it's also blatant commentary on the way the media affects our culture, as well as the Machiavellian style of big business. And remember to watch out for the little man, because he can be just as dangerous as any of the big CEOs. The biggest problem for me, though, actually kind of similar to Dan, is that this actually kept the film from perfection to me, was the plight of the main character becomes so difficult to care about. As we learn more about him, it wasn't really sure if I wanted him to succeed. Maybe that's the point, because I've seen dark characters become compelling. Recent examples, oftentimes you got your Tony Soprano, Walter White. Somebody can be a criminal, but you can still see the likable side of their personality, make them human.
Oh, yeah.
We don't really get that as we learn more about
No.
Gyllenhaal.
I don't know if he has one.
I don't know. And that just kind of leads to this really bothersome conclusion. I can't say it isn't poignant, but I can't say that I liked it. And along with some minor pacing issues, I'm actually going to leave Nightcrawler with the highest grade here with an A-.
Okay.
Oh,
To be
okay.
honest, I thought I was going to be on the lower end there.
Well,
So,
Yeah, actually, I thought Justin would like it probably the best of all of us. I have a problem with... It wasn't even just him. It was kind of everybody. Everybody at the news station, Rene Russo's boss even... Just everybody was sort of...
even his partner,
Icky.
who you think he's kind of like just trying to
Right.
survive, kind of is a bit selfish and
You're right.
forceful as well.
You're right.
But
I
I
would
mean,
say
that's-
he's probably the most relatable.
He's the most
But
sympathetic,
still,
but even
you're
towards
right.
Dan, we're like, wow, he's kind of has no real scruples as well. He's just in it for the money. He'll do whatever.
Right.
that's essentially the nature of this film. These people are willing to throw their lives completely on the line for nothing more than to make a solid buck to get by.
Or, in I think Gyllenhaal's case, maybe fame, fortune, success.
Fortune. Some degree of a business.
And it's kind of, that's the interesting thing, is he does have a lot of determination. He has good qualities in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But he eliminates anything good about himself as a person to get ahead.
And something you said isn't exactly true. He doesn't put his life on the line to get the story or to make a buck. He puts everybody else around him, their lives on the line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where I was going with that was just simply how dirty you have to play to survive in that field.
Yeah, well, he does. He plays very dirty with everyone
And everything.
around him. And even right from the beginning, though, I mean, the very first scene, he's trying to steal
a thief.
metal fencing, to pawn. And maybe at first you're like, okay, what's this guy's deal? Why is he doing this? Is he...
He's struggled. He's
yeah.
hard off.
Is he a homeless person?
But
But he has a really nice car.
And he's got a big TV.
Yeah.
And he's
But
like,
he doesn't start out with a really nice car.
But that's true. But if you
still has a
look,
car.
look inside his apartment, you think, okay, this guy isn't really struggling. Basically doing odd jobs and thievery.
Yeah.
He's
Right.
doing whatever other criminal activities he's involved with. He's managed to make a decent little life for himself. But it just isn't enough for him.
Yeah.
It's true, you can see him as kind of sympathetic there. Possibly like, okay, maybe he is desperate. But then again, he does start off as a thief.
Right.
Yeah.
But he does try to make his way into the honest living at the beginning, a little bit.
He does. Yeah, he tries to get a job with the construction guy that's buying the fencing from him.
And he does try to say, hey, he does try to kind of play it straight for a brief second there.
But his entire spiel in that scene is so indicative of the character just being clued out to who he is. He honestly believes that he's a good person
He does.
and a hardworking person, and just none of that's true. And that speaks to Gyllenhaal's performance, that he can convey that in that brief, opening monologue.
It does also imply that the character might be mentally ill. Because,
Sort of.
Yes.
Because, like, he definitely... The sociopath is a good term because you can tell he can't quite relate to people. Everything he's learned about the world, he's learned through studying. He really wants to try and fit in, which is why he honestly believes the way he communicates, the way he handles his business is perfectly okay. And the sad thing is, in a way, a lot of people think it is.
I was going to say...
He's just a more extreme example.
Is it necessarily that he's a bad person, or the fact that he's taking up these business practices where...
There are actual models out there.
Yeah, where this is like a whole study.
It's like you said, Bill Paxton, Rene Russo, they're not really much better.
Exactly. And to speak to that, take a field like paparazzi. People might have different opinions on that, but I think if, your job is to, follow people with a camera all day and creep on them when they're eating, which is what a despicable living.
But people eat it up.
But people eat it up. So it's chicken or the egg, If everybody stopped caring, then they would go away. And same with the TV news, If nobody watched the gory, bloody stories at the beginning of the broadcast.
That's what sells.
Right.
So in a way, it's like, okay, the people, the society's kind of feeding into these people.
Which is, I would say, other than Gyllenhaal's performance, the best part of the movie is that whole commentary. Well, good. Good ones all around. And Joe, you missed our next one, but Justin and I are going to talk about Ouija. And this one was based on the classic party game. High schooler Debbie, played by Shelley Hennig, commits suicide after playing the spooky game alone, something that she was told by her best friend to never do when they were kids. Suspecting foul play, that friend Lane, played by Olivia Cook, attempts to contact Debbie's ghost through the same Ouija board, along with a group of their friends. It does not go well, and one by one, members of the group start dying. Originally, Hasbro was pitching this for Michael Bay to work his quote-unquote magic big-budget style, like he did with Hasbro's Transformers line.
I'm just picturing a ghost exploding.
Well, I didn't understand what they were doing with that. But thankfully, cooler heads prevailed, and it went to Master of Horror Jason Blum's Blumhouse Productions, to be directed by Styles White and made for a very modest budget. However, the result is not anything exciting, but I have to be thankful that at least Hasbro didn't waste $100 million on this mess with Michael Bay. The acting, other than from lead Cook, is pretty weak, and even by horror standards, these kids make really dumb decisions. The story isn't terrible, and throws a curveball or two, and at least unlike most of 2014's horror offerings, it attempts to scare throughout rather than waiting till an hour into the movie for anything to happen. Make no mistake, it's got no brain, but it's not the worst, and I give Ouija a C-. Justin?
It honestly bugs me that in terms of Halloween entertainment options for moviegoers in 2014, it has basically been down to Ouija or Annabelle, and if you're truly desperate, Saw. Great horror movies don't need to be a bloodbath, but rather take their time and let the atmosphere and narrative do the scaring, which is why James Wan, who we talked about earlier, showed up in my top 5 21st century directorial debut list. Ouija, in dramatic contrast, just goes through the motions, hoping to scare newcomers to horror with numerous predictable jump scares, and it just gets worse as it goes along. Though I feel like I should start with the positive, since there are so few in this movie. The story, much like Dan said, once it gets going, which is roughly around Act 3, is actually interesting, and some of the ideas for the atmosphere aren't bad. The problem is, everything about this movie is done in the most generic and lazy way humanly possible. Acting among all the young cast is essentially a cliche of every generic horror film, and while it's always a pleasure seeing Lynn Shay again, who most probably know as the lovable psychic from Insidious, her 2 scenes cannot compensate for this mess of a movie, and I give it a D.
No, but she was good.
Oh no, she was great in those scenes. It's just, once she's gone, she's gone.
Mm-hmm. It's certainly nothing earth-shattering. Nobody's gonna put this at the top of their 2014 lists.
I certainly hope not.
But I don't know. I mean, I don't agree that all of it comes down to these jump scares. There's definitely a few, but how the people die is a little bit different.
Sort of.
Different from a jump scare, I mean.
Well,
not
yeah.
Original and never been seen before. That's pretty hard to do.
People die.
Yeah, people die. There's only so many ways you could die. So, I mean, I'll give it that the kids went one by one as opposed to, in the last 15 minutes of the movie, everybody dies.
Yeah.
Because we've seen that time and time again as well, and that gets really old. I feel like this is kind of along the same lines as, like, Oculus.
Basically.
Which, didn't blow any of us away, but it's not
Oculus at least
horrible.
Oculus at least had more originality, though.
Yeah.
Evil mirror.
It did. But even the concept of, the Ouija board as the portal to darker things, that's been done before.
Well, yeah.
I feel like it probably had a better cast.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen all those actors in other things. I don't know about these kids, but...
Yeah, the kids, I didn't really recognize any of them, but, I mean, they were, like, okay. My biggest problem with them was they just made stupid decisions. And it's the classic that actually they poke fun at quite well in one of the Haunted House movies, where the boyfriend of the Suicide Girl's best friend, like, doesn't believe any of this. Even after people start dying, he's like, oh,
there's no
I don't
way.
know. Yeah, like, the first time, Joe, that they're playing with the Ouija board to contact this girl's spirit, all the lights go out, and he just doesn't think, oh, let's go down the basement and see what we can find. Like, I guess there's a power outage. Like,
maybe you should back up a second.
Yeah,
Just a little bit.
I didn't... He was an idiot. At one point, he rides his bike into this, like, haunted tunnel
alleyway?
area. Yeah, like, alleyway, like,
So
tunnel.
basically, he's asking for it.
Yeah.
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 There's no other way to cut it.
Like, even if you don't believe it, maybe you should just avoid it for superstition's
Yeah.
sake. You know what?
If only.
I'll just... No, don't tempt fate. Like, you know what?
Even the adults in this movie make dumb decisions, though. Like, this girl's best friend just commits suicide, and her little sister is a handful, and yet the single dad, literally, like, the next day goes on a 2-week vacation. See you, girls. Your grandmother will be around if you need her.
Great guy.
Bye. It's like...
He didn't
You guys
care.
house at her house.
It was, yeah.
Honestly, he sounds like the smartest character.
Because he laughed.
He's just like, you know what? You deal with it.
Let's not deal with the creepy stuff.
Yeah.
Dollars, who needs them?
He has 2. If he loses one, he has a spare.
Yes, right.
So.
Like a tire.
So yeah, not too much to write home about with that. Let's go to John Wick, and Joe's gonna have that one.
A.K.A. James Candle.
James Candle, as he's known
Some circles.
in some parts.
John Wick is an action thriller film directed by David Lech and starring Keanu Reeves in the titular role as John Wick, who has just lost his wife to cancer and receives a gift from her posthumously in the form of a puppy named Daisy. And Daisy is so cute and manipulative. Along with the letter that she arranged to have sent to him, she really reveals that she sent Daisy to help him cope with her demise. Initially, Keanu is indifferent to the dog, but obviously warms up and connects with the dog, and they spend the day driving around in his... The only other thing he really cares about, his awesome car, the 69 vintage Mustang.
Mm-hmm.
This leads to the conflict. He encounters a trio of young Russian punks, one of them being Theon Greyjoy from Game of Thrones, who basically plays the same annoying character. He really does, but perfect for the role. These gang members that he runs into at the gas station, that character is Yosef, and this gangster approaches him and insists on buying his car. John, of course, refuses, and they eventually sneak up on him in his house, steal the car, beat him up, and murder the dog, which was a huge mistake. Now, after that, we realize that John Wick is apparently a former hitman and a legend in the business, and he goes on a one-man killing spree to go after this guy and basically takes on this whole Russian mafia group in the meantime. It's very similar to The Equalizer. John Wick basically stays within the similar formula. Still, it manages to stand out with some great cinematography and music, as well as some genuinely compelling action. In a film like this, it doesn't really need to be much more, at least it knows what it is. Reeves and the rest of the cast do what they need to do, and for the most part, it's a pretty fun ride. Certainly more style than substance, but the style is pretty darn cool, and I give it a B-.
Justin, what'd you think of Mr. Wick?
We've talked at length here on the show about misleading and just plain bad marketing that has usually been in front of movies that managed to be even worse. In 2014, John Wick is probably the equivalent of 2012's End of Watch promotions, seemingly looking to be awful, only to end up being a truly pleasant surprise. While a fairly familiar action revenge premise, only so many ways it can be spun at this point, John Wick keeps its story focused and only giving out the most minimal of details. There's almost no backstory on the wide assortment of characters that John supposedly knows, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a film that in the wrong hands could have been a complete disaster, but here it's progressively intense, focused, and most importantly for an action film, a genuinely entertaining experience. Occasionally the film flirts with action cliché, particularly with the villains, albeit never falling into the Equalizer territory, but definitely seemingly endless amount of henchmen. But with a legitimate performance from Reeves, likely channeling his own personal demons and tragedies into the character, and some gorgeous sets, lighting, and solid editing, this can be mostly overlooked. Though there's still some time left in this year, at the moment, John Wick stands as probably the best action film for 2014, and I give it a B+.
You guys both mentioned The Equalizer, which we reviewed just weeks ago, and this movie really is not all that different. Some sort of former agent who's basically unbeatable, even though he could have been murdered 10 times over, Russian villains, deceased wife, but a couple key things make this a better watch than that one. Now, Reeves does give his best performance in over a decade here, but of course he's no Denzel. It is in the storytelling that this movie is better. There aren't any extra plots, so it's quickly paced. Wick's reason for revenge seems to make a lot more sense for him personally. Mm-hmm. And as you both mentioned, it's just more fun. The chase scenes are good. You know, the music is fun and adds to the story. I enjoyed The Equalizer enough, but this is truly the revenge actioner of the year, and I'm with Justin. It gets a B+ from me as well. I was surprised by this not only because it's Keanu Reeves, but I didn't know really anything about it. I saw one preview for it the week before, and that's all I had to go on. And the movie it was in front of was Addicted. So it was like, all right, that doesn't bode too well maybe for it. What do you guys think of his reasoning? Because Denzel was just trying to be a nice guy, I guess.
Yeah.
But this is definitely a more personal story, and I think people can maybe relate to that more.
It's because there's a more direct connection with all the bad guys.
Yeah, that's true. And a great Leguizamo performance as well.
The one guy that knows what's going on.
For about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But you're right. He sort of is. He knows everyone involved somehow.
Everybody likes John Wick.
Yes.
Really, nobody. Either they like him or they're so afraid of him they know not to mess with him.
Right.
Now that is one problem with the movie. Similar to The Equalizer, it has almost no tension.
I don't agree.
Yeah.
I completely disagree, actually.
Well, you're wrong.
Denzel is basically unbeatable in The Equalizer.
This is
John Wick, there's at least 6 instances where he either
2
gets messed up badly or is...
Justin, he is unbeatable.
The only time he really gets messed up is
when he gets captured.
At the very beginning. Yeah, when he gets...
It's like stabbed.
Right, he gets stabbed,
apparently
they
weren't
woke him up.
Not paying attention to near-death experience by the end of the movie.
Justin, he's able to kick every arse of every Russian bad guy with his intestines bleeding out.
I'm not denying that. I'm just saying.
So no, because he's 10 years younger, he's more unbeatable than Denzel Washington.
It's not like an Equalizer where he doesn't even get shot.
Because he has to outthink guys because he can't get into hand-to-hand combat as much.
I'm sorry, if you're going to get into combat, you're going to get hurt.
But if you remember The Equalizer, he avoided it as much as possible. Stealth is
I stand by my original point. If you're going to get in combat in any situation, you are going to get hurt in some way, shape, or form by somebody at some point.
But there were 2 different methods there.
Wick is pretty unbeatable.
I'm not saying he's...
I mentioned it in my review.
That's the one problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's definitely more focused. I mean, you buy it,
yeah,
because everybody says this guy's unbeatable,
right?
Whereas in Equalizer, we don't know. Everybody's who is this guy?
Yeah, we don't learn who he is till halfway through the movie,
which is fine, and that's the problem. It's like that was for me. I'm like, I'm not really worried about John Wick at all. He's gonna destroy everybody, and also your big finale was not as really appealing because the main bad guy was a joke. Oh yeah, I'm gonna get into this fist fight that is older than I am.
I mean, give you the final face-off with...
And he was goofy. Mm-hmm. I mean, admittedly, you can... He was.
In contrast to Equalizer Russian?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Actually, the Equalizer final fight was more tense because, really, if it was a hand-to-hand fight...
He kills them with a nail gun.
Because he couldn't have done it otherwise.
It's what he had at his disposal.
But I thought it was awesome. Actually, it's kind of interesting. I liked the Equalizer more, to be completely honest, because I thought he was a more compelling character. I thought the story was more interesting. And I really liked the fact that he had to outthink his enemies using stealth, and with that whole nail gun scene at the end was my favorite part of the movie.
I like that he used his brain more, but the Equalizer had too much padding that didn't need to be. Like, this was a crisp movie that knew what it wanted to be and got there. I had fun in both, but I had more fun in this one because of the pacing, I would say.
Equalizer is definitely too long. And the only reason I thought we were going to have to bring this up, Justin, is that I know you said you thought The Equalizer was a pretty generic action movie when John Wick is the generic action movie.
But here's the thing.
So I would like you to give me a little explanation as to why your grades so radically different. Now, I'm sure you like the style more, but continue.
1, John Wick is significantly more focused. 2, Wick is better written.
Debatable,
but I think so. 3, I thought it was better edited. There are moments in Equalizer that are kind of cool, like the thinking thing is cool, even though I personally thought it completely and utterly ripped off Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
Thank you,
that's what I said on the show. That was a little Holmesy.
I mean, not bad. I appreciate the effort, but underwhelming. And yes, he is unbeatable, but he still gets hurt a lot. Unlike Denzel Washington, who pretty much walks. I think the worst that happens to him is he breaks his hand.
I thought the car chases in John Wick were cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that the Equalizer didn't really have.
Car chases?
I mean, just classically, like...
I don't think so, yeah.
Like, Wick's in a cool car, they're in a, big SUV, that classic,
And most importantly, and I don't think either of you may think the same about this, but there was kind of an essence of John Wick that had a sort of dark humor component to it that I liked.
Yeah, it did. Like, the fact that pretty much the whole criminal underworld was like a club, and everybody kind of like was making fun of the fact that they're all horrible killers, and
the entire scene with the cop.
Yeah, the scene with the cop was funny, but once again, John Wick is unbeatable. Everyone's afraid of him. I don't know.
You don't mess with him.
You don't mess with him, which is fun, but for me, I mean, don't get me wrong, they're both pretty unbeatable. But John Wick, it's like everybody knew it.
Yeah.
Even the bad guys knew they were doomed. So for me, I was like, okay, let's go. Let's move on with this.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I thought John Wick dragged once or twice.
Is that right?
Personally.
Okay. And Justin, if I remember correctly, Equalizer was a C- for you?
It was a C.
A C,
Which I think is honestly... I think these are about the same.
I mean, I definitely think Wick's better, but it's B- to B+ for me. I did enjoy the Equalizer. It was still a positive grade. I just thought it was too long.
Yeah, I could pretty much agree with that.
Yeah.
I think they're pretty close, though.
Well, up next is our home media moment, and that is The Normal Heart. And Justin's going to have that one.
As HIV becomes a growing crisis in New York City in the 80s, Dr. Emma Bruckner, played by Julia Roberts, requests that openly gay writer Ned Weeks, played by Mark Ruffalo, help raise awareness in the gay community. After a meeting in Weeks' home about this gets dismissed due to lack of sufficient evidence, Ned recruits his friends Tommy, played by Jim Parsons, Bruce, played by Taylor Kitsch, and Mickey, played by Joe Mantello, to form the Gay Men's Health Crisis to sponsor fundraising for research for the disease via phone line in a desperate hope to find a cure. Due to circumstances of setting up the show, Dan put The Normal Heart in my hands with one request: do it justice and sell it up. That's a request I can easily honor because The Normal Heart practically sells itself and ultimately shattered any expectations I have had for made-for-TV films and has raised the bar tremendously for ones to come. Obviously, The Normal Heart was an HBO made-for-TV film, obviously a big contrast from public stations, and although we don't necessarily do this for the show, I'm very glad we made an exception. While a star-studded cast is usually something to be concerned about in most movies, The Normal Heart gives everyone something to do, and the result is nothing shy of explosive. From Ruffalo to Jim Parsons to Alfred Molina, I must have burst into tears at least 5 times watching this for the show, and I tell you listeners, I would happily watch it again for those same reasons. The story is intense, emotionally devastating, and yet never has a dull moment to be found within its 130-minute running time. Although there are a few moments where the adaptation stage roots come in a little bit, which may seem awkward for some audiences, personally, it didn't do anything but display how much talent every actor involved in this film truly has, and how much I wish this had received a theatrical release. Regardless of being a made-for-TV movie, The Normal Heart is an incredible film with numerous powerful performances that I cannot recommend enough, and I give it an A+.
Justin, I don't think you've seen enough HBO films because they are typically of the highest caliber. I've given so many high grades to these movies. They're oftentimes better than a blockbuster drama and have the cast pedigree to back it up. The Normal Heart thrives on the fantastic performances from these true A-listers. I can't say the movie is perfect, as some of the previous entries from the channel, Temple Grandin and Grey Gardens among them. The direction is a bit scattershot at the beginning, and at times there's a little too many characters to care about. Also, I felt like coming off the heels of Dallas Buyers Club, it does pale in comparison, but Ruffalo and Roberts both have two of the absolute standout monologues of the year, and amidst some other great performances and very strong emotional impact, it is definitely a winner, and it gets an A- from me. Joe?
Just wow.
What a movie.
Really. Ruffalo's best performance.
Oh, yeah.
Hands down.
Yeah, no argument.
Yeah.
Heart-wrenching, gritty, unforgiving. This one doesn't pull any punches. It also treats the issue with fairness and shows the protagonists as people, as much flaws of their own time as their oppressors. Once you get past the first 20 minutes, which really annoyed me,
Yep.
it was unnecessary, this movie just sucks you in. It's compelling drama with outstanding performances, Molina, everybody. If it wasn't for the fact that I felt like a lot of these characters were kind of stereotypes and some of the exploitative stuff that HBO did at the beginning, that first like 20 minutes or so was at the beach with awkward Ruffalo went on too long.
It was unnecessary.
That was scattershot, but really, other than that, it was amazingly impressive. I give it an A.
Wow. Who knew I would be the low one on the totem pole?
Well, you also said it yourself. You've seen more of the HBO original films than I have. And
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I've seen probably an even dozen, maybe. Beyond the Candelabra, was that your only exposure to HBO films?
Behind the Candelabra, the Paradise Lost films. Outside of that, I can't think of too many.
Okay. I'm not sure why you're surprised then, because you gave both of those movies very high marks.
Well, that's true too.
You know?
Well, remember, if it's on TV, it's inferior.
But it's not TV, it's HBO, as their tagline. It always is.
Yep.
But no, I mean, they always get A-listers. You know, they had Al Pacino for the Jack Kevorkian movie, and
Angels in America too, right?
Kevin Bacon. I didn't see that, but yes,
sorry.
I believe that's HBO. You know, Kevin Bacon has done movies with them. Tom Hanks did
Band of Brothers.
Band of Brothers, of course, which is a miniseries. To be honest, I mean, if HBO Films was
Real.
an actual movie studio,
They'd be the number one.
they would easily compete with anything at the box office, certainly in the dramatic area.
I think that's because they have
Yeah.
a big budget and they know what their audience is. Like, they know what their audience is generally like.
Yeah.
The big, the drama, the heavy, but they don't hold anything back.
Right.
They don't cater to multiple people because they're exposing it to everybody.
Yeah.
You pay for it, you watch it.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. They answer to no one but themselves. I didn't realize this was a stage play. I'd never heard of it until it came on HBO this summer.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize that until I looked it up.
Yeah.
In preparation for the show.
I mean, it's completely unsurprising after watching it.
Oh yeah.
Which
But
character
yeah,
had the biggest heart, though?
Julia Roberts, I would say.
Given the circumstances, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she just keeps impressing me. You know, August Osage County is one of my favorite performances from her. And the scene where she's having to give her presentation to the
Just tears into
the
those
board.
guys.
Yeah.
Oh my God, was that just an amazing, amazing performance?
That was great because she was so mad.
But yeah.
It's like, what do you want me to do?
really was.
Rightfully so.
She really was.
You guys are all idiots. You're
Right.
killing yourselves. What
Yeah.
else do you want me to do?
Yeah, I mean, she definitely had the biggest heart. The least normal heart, I would say.
Yeah, she was pretty impressive, actually. She was like the one doctor that cared.
That is completely true.
That's not even a lie.
No.
No.
And it's really good to see Taylor Kitsch getting something interesting to do since Friday Night Lights. The 3 or 4 movies he's done
Not great.
have just not been great.
Yeah.
And he's got talent, you know,
Oh yeah.
but he also wants to be in a big Disney blockbuster and just happened to be John Carter.
Oh,
so,
the poor guy.
Yeah, which was okay, but you know.
Hey, he was still the best part of X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
thinking of Savages and Battleship. But yes, he was a good Gambit.
He's in some mixed bags, isn't he?
He really is. And like I say, it's a shame because he's, as we saw in this, he's actually a really good actor.
He's got some talent, yeah.
You know, and Jim Parsons too.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yes.
You know, people that might only know him, you know, as Sheldon, I think would be very shocked to find the drama in this.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, good one all around. Justin, see some more HBO films.
No question.
And let's move in now to our top 5 comedies of the last 5 years. This is the first in a series leading up to the end of 2014. We're going to sort of tackle different genres, sort of on a more broad sense that we wouldn't do in a normal week, and kind of count down our favorites of the last few years. Joe, we're going to start with you for the top 5 comedies 2010 and up.
All right. Well, this was tough, mostly because a lot of my comedies that I was looking into sort of bled into other things. I kind of realized, I guess that in recent years, I'm not as much of a comedy guy. In fact, before the show, I don't think I really sought out too many comedies. I'm sure I'm going to get some controversial ones on here. A couple honorable mentions, because they bleed into other things. Seven Psychopaths.
Nice.
It's kind of an action comedy, but still liked it. Grand Budapest. Funny, but also more dramatic, kind of quirky. And also The Muppets. Muppets is very good, but it's a musical, so I'm trying to branch it out a little bit.
Nice.
All right. Number 5 for me would be Chef. It's so low because it's a really funny movie, but it's also really intertwined with drama, but I still found it really funny. So I thought that being a really good movie, one of the best of the year so far, it probably makes it on this list. My number 4 is 22 Jump Street. This movie was almost as funny as the original, but really, really enjoyable. Got a great kick out of it. Was really surprised. Number 3, this is really going to surprise some people, but The Heat. I mean, I love this movie.
You do love The Heat?
I really enjoy this movie.
I can't wait to watch it for a new class.
Melissa McCarthy, I was pretty much unfamiliar with her until this. She blew me away, and Sandra Bullock hasn't really done anything this funny in a while. The two of them together was just great, right up there. My number 2, can anyone guess what it is?
21 Jump Street?
It's 21 Jump Street, because I had never seen this until you guys introduced this to me.
Oh, cool.
It's even better than the second one, of course. Not by much, though. Really, really funny movie. I mean, Hell and Tatum are just great together. Really, really big surprises for me. So
cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, great list so far.
Yeah.
Justin?
Number 5, I'm sure will make Dan very happy, and that is Horrible Bosses. Without saying too much about this, it was a very pleasant second viewing. And thank you very much for the opportunity. My number 4 is The Muppets. Jason Segel found a way to breathe new life into a franchise that I think most of us considered before this film was well past its prime. It has ridiculously catchy songs and scenarios, and I honestly wish the sequel had been as good. Number 3 is a movie that I really honestly wish had gotten seen more. Is Sleepwalk with Me. I thought it was a really honest, very simple story, and yet has some really great bits. And I think it says a lot not only about Mike Birbiglia, but also the art of stand-up comedy as a whole. Just getting into that politic. And my number 2, as I'm sure both of you would expect, the Grand Budapest Hotel. No. We've joked that this has basically been the year of the fines, but what can I say? He gives a fantastic performance in here. He's funny, he's dramatic, but without compromising the tone of the movie. I think it just has some crazy, outrageous scenarios that really I'm still thinking about well after we originally watched it.
I have a couple of honorable mentions as well. Like Joe, they were more genre-specific related. August Osage County had some funny moments. Wouldn't call it a comedy. The Kids Are All Right, more of a coming of age. Definitely wanted to throw that out there. And I do have an honorable mention that is a straight-up comedy that I don't think we'll be mentioning it in any other venue, but that's Our Idiot Brother with Paul Rudd and Zooey Deschanel. It's a fantastic movie. Didn't really make my top 5, but wanted to mention it anyway. My number 5 is Date Night. That's Tina Fey and Steve Carell. Fantastic chemistry together. Very, very funny. And really fun cameos as well from the likes of Mila Kunis and Mark Wahlberg. My number 4 is 21 Jump Street. We've talked about this on the show before, but Joe, I'm with you. I mean, I think the sequel, not quite as good, but really right up there. Just very, very clever, and from something that I don't think anybody really on paper thought would work. My number 3 is Horrible Bosses. We'll be talking about that a little bit later in the show as my pick, so I don't think I need to go into too much detail about that. And my number 2 is Moonrise Kingdom. This is just a very funny movie from start to finish with some really strong performances from people who we don't always see doing comedy like Bruce Willis, but they all make it work. Joe?
Moonrise Kingdom I thought about, but I honestly thought of that as very balanced with drama.
That's kind of how I felt with Chef.
But, I mean, it's fine. But believe me, I thought about it. Number 1 is actually Horrible Bosses.
Nice.
And that's all I'm going to say.
Great. Justin, how about from you?
Moonrise Kingdom. Obviously, we've talked about this many, many times on the show, but obviously it got me back on board with Anderson. So many unforgettable characters, and probably one of the most original comedies about young love I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, my number 1 is Bridesmaids. We will get to this eventually on the Oscar A to Z, if not beforehand, but this is just a fantastic movie. A breakout performance from Kristen Wiig, for those that did not know her, not Saturday Night Live fans. And the first time I had ever seen Chris O'Dowd as well, which he's popped up in probably 4 movies this year alone. And it also introduced us to Rebel Wilson, who is the best part of Pitch Perfect. Just a really, really great movie. And, Joe, my main introduction to Melissa McCarthy.
Oh.
Yeah.
I still need to see it.
Yes, and see it you will.
All in due time, sir.
Because it's great. So yeah, next week we'll have a top 5 action list for 2010 through 2014. So we'll do the big action films of the last few years. Right now, though, let's move into our final portion of the show, the triple feature, and that is going to start with Joe and the new classic Cloud Atlas.
Cloud Atlas is a 2012 German drama and science fiction film written, produced, and directed by the Wachowskis and Tom Twyker?
Yep.
Or is he a tweaker? Adapted from the 2004 novel Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, the film has multiple plot lines that are set across 6 different eras. The official synopsis is described as an exploration on how the actions of individuals' lives impact one another in the past, present, and future, as one soul is shaped from a killer into a hero, and an act of kindness ripples across the centuries to inspire a revolution. Pretty bold. The film can either be looked at as a more literal storyline regarding reincarnation, or a more naturalistic idea, based on the cyclical transfer of ideas over time, through all actions that are connected throughout different eras. This movie has a very interesting concept, and is very bold in its execution. However, it is understandable why this movie is so divisive. First, I must say that there are some great performances here, most notably from Hugo Weaving, Jim Broadbent, and Donna Bai. I also cannot begin to commend the amazing makeup work. It's some of the best I've ever seen. Just transforming all these different actors into different characters. Really, I think that the makeup crew should get top props more than anyone else. Really, hats off to you guys. The roles themselves also look mostly impressive. And this is where my review goes into a different direction. Perhaps it's due to the scope of the story, but this movie is too long. Or maybe it just has some pacing issues. In fact, at least for myself, I think I know why. I'm only really interested in half the stories. Some we don't get enough time with, others are given too much time, and some just end too quickly. This is probably why there are mixed feelings. Depending on the story you like, you're probably going to be more likely half satisfied no matter how you look at it. So really, for me, from scene to scene, Cloud Atlas ranged from an A- to a D. There are some hints of greatness, but it's a truly mixed bag, and I give it a B-.
Okay. Yeah, it's certainly an epic film, and it does not hold back in presenting its themes, with actors that spread their wings unflinchingly exploring their characters. But it is not for the casual watcher. It's one you definitely have to pay attention to really get something out of. The cinematography and direction is beautiful. I have to echo you about the makeup. I mean, we see each of these actors take on 5+ roles, and each one is completely different. But the big issue with it, going along with an overly long runtime that Joe mentioned, is that it just tries to do way too much. There's too many characters to follow, some of which involve themselves in storylines that are not interesting. Is it overstuffed and overly self-important? Probably, but I'll be damned if I wasn't also engaged at the same level. And for me, it gets a B. For me, I'd say I was probably intrigued by 2/3 of the stories.
Yeah.
You know?
That's probably about right.
Yeah. Justin, what about you?
Well, this one, I'll be honest, I said it when I originally saw it. This was bound for awards all over the place, and I'm still floored no one ever took it into consideration. I thought the art direction was sensational. Costumes were incredible. Makeup, I think you said it your best yourself, Joe. And I mean, even the fact that they were able to cobble this together out of 6 stories and make them work. I think a lot of people were very intimidated by this film because there's so much going on. But I think it's really said best very earlier in the film. It's going to seem very confusing, but it will make sense. And I think for the most part it does. It has a lot of really interesting ideas. I thought stylistically it was great. Acting-wise, I feel like it really showcases everyone involved. I do admit it's a little erratic at some points. I think occasionally we get too much on one story and not enough in others. But they all are generally hitting home the same themes, which I think remains consistent throughout. I can't really defend the whole Yellowface ordeal, and it kind of bugged me that they were playing with the birthmark motif, which was a big portion in the book apparently, but they just introduced it in the start and it never really comes back. Mm-hmm. But what really honestly sold this for me was the score. It just fits so well in terms of scope and scale of the entire film as a whole. It may not be perfect, but it's definitely got its merits, and I honestly hope it gets a cult following in the years to come.
Probably.
And I give it a B+.
I think the Academy has a real problem when a movie was supposed to be a big Oscar tentpole and bombs and is very divisive with critics and audiences alike. And so I believe that's why it got overlooked. Now, unfortunately, that did leak over to art direction, cinematography, all these things that the movie excels at.
Yeah.
You don't want to bother giving it time.
No,
right.
Once again, the Academy plays it safe. They go by what they go by what's popular because they don't want to get too much attention. And really, this is why I don't really mind, because Cloud Atlas got the appreciation from the people that really care about it. Mm-hmm. Because I'm sorry, screw the Academy. The Saturn Awards, they gave Cloud Atlas what they needed. Okay, it's the science fiction community.
Right.
It's got a fan base.
It's their own people giving their own work awards.
Like, Justin, don't worry. I think that it's definitely got potential to develop a cult status. It's reminiscent of a lot of films like it. Very ambitious. I think that's the key word. Perhaps overly ambitious. Mm-hmm. Not perfect. Some flaws.
Well, when you're trying to take on something like this, I think it's hard not to be overly ambitious.
It's understandable, but the point is,
sorry,
something like that, when you're adapting something that complicated, you're almost doomed to get something wrong, but that's the translation issue. But that's fine. It's an example of a movie that's flawed, but it's kind of beautiful in its flaws.
Oh yeah.
I do agree. It's very beautiful, and it is beautiful in those flaws too. I wonder if the material might have been better suited though for
a series,
a 2 or 3 part miniseries,
a TV show, maybe.
I feel like a TV show.
Don't you think this is kind of like a J.J. Abrams sort of thing, like Lost?
Yes, it is. It's I got that
flash
vibe
forward,
very much.
Flash sideways. I'm serious.
Not that far in Lost, but
no, but
I know what you're talking about.
It's reminiscent of that style. I think that's why I think the movie feels overly long, and yet there's still not enough time. There's too much going on.
Yeah,
it's understandable.
And all the themes do, come together, like you said, Justin, by the end. But I feel like because of the sort of bizarre setup of the movie, we don't get enough from the people we want to see. And sometimes we get too much from people we don't care about.
Now, this is just kind of a note. Maybe this is controversial. But in terms of performances, I didn't think Tom Hanks was particularly great in this one.
Actually, you're not wrong on that. Of the last maybe decade of his work, it's not among his best.
Now, I just thought it was I'm not saying it was bad, of course, but it just seemed very by the numbers.
Part of that also, I think, might be that particular timeline with him and Halle Berry speaking that really annoying, I don't even know, like broken English.
I'll be honest.
Deteriorated English.
I feel like that was one of the bigger hooks in the movie, that was the most boring storyline.
Yeah.
Even though it was kind of supposed to be the climactic
The
one.
clincher, yeah.
I'm just like, I don't know. Somehow it's far in the future, post-apocalyptic, and yet everything is much more metaphorical here. So
Yeah.
I don't know. And perhaps a little on the nose. I know that you
Perhaps.
didn't like the Hugo Weaving Grinch character.
I really hated that. That was... Yeah, that really is, I would say, my least favorite of all of the
Which is
storylines.
a shame because I feel like that one, the world had a lot of
It
potential.
had a lot of potential.
But it just didn't draw me in. I don't know. Hugh Grant was good, though.
Hugh Grant was really good, and, if he...
And then he's gone.
And he's gone.
If he can sort of segue into these more
He should.
dramatic, adventurous roles, I'd be fine with that.
Because, he's pretty much just done the basic lovable comedy, romance
He's
guy.
done that to death.
But you see him in this movie taking all kinds of bizarre roles and being good at them. We're like, Hugh Grant, you got a lot more potential.
Yeah, why are you selling yourself short?
Yeah.
Also, Susan Sarandon, she's always good.
Yeah.
But we don't see her for a good hour and a half of the movie straight.
That's the thing. Some
You know?
some people literally were just in it to add to the ensemble. I think.
Right.
Okay, you want to be in this movie? You were here. We'll shoot for a day. Hey, I don't know.
Let me ask you something, because I've kind of been thinking about this a little bit since we last watched it. Would you have preferred if they did each story in its entirety, or done it interspersed like the movie decided to pull off?
You mean like do it in sequence, like part 1, part 2, part 3?
No. Like you see every single story beginning, middle, and end.
No,
within the same movie?
I wouldn't have liked that.
You mean like it's like all one story and then done within the same movie?
No, like as a series of shorts.
Well, I think that's what we were sort of getting
like a TV
at.
show.
Make it
Yeah.
a miniseries,
Or
a TV
multiple
show.
movies or something.
Yeah.
You mean if it was all condensed into one movie in sequence, I think it would have been even less interesting, because by the time you get to another story at the end, you'll have forgotten what happened at the beginning.
Yeah, no, I think it would be far less interesting that way.
It would probably be overkill.
Because you'd be like, okay, I think this was supposed to symbolize these people back
Right.
here, but
Yeah.
I don't even remember who they were at the
Right.
beginning of the movie.
No, you do it in a Lost fashion where, look, Lost has 20 regular cast members,
Yeah.
but we don't see all of them in every episode.
Sometimes
we
you
don't
go a couple episodes without seeing some.
So, obviously you got maybe 2 or 3 main leads, and then some people you won't see for 3 episodes, and then we come back to their story and you're like, oh yeah, I like these guys.
Yeah.
If it was done in that sort of episodic nature, sure. But yeah, going chronological or story to story, beginning, middle, end, I don't think that would be good at all for this movie.
Okay, so you would have definitely liked it all the way it is in the film.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way it is now. I just wish that all of the stories were as compelling as the last.
Fair point.
Yeah. All right, well, up next is my pick for old classic, and that is Horrible Bosses. Jason Bateman, Jason Sudeikis, and Charlie Day play guys whose bosses make their lives a living hell in easily one of the sharpest comedies in recent years. The bosses are an evil narcissist, played by Kevin Spacey, a power-mad cokehead, played by Colin Farrell, and a sex-crazed harasser, played by Jennifer Aniston. The guys sit around complaining about their work lives when they jokingly mention life would be better if their bosses weren't around, leading to a more serious discussion about murdering them. They even recruit the help of a jailbird at a local dive bar, whose name I will not mention, played by Jamie Foxx. What follows is a string of bad decisions made by idiots. Horrible Bosses is not only a scream throughout, with punchlines delivered by 3 comedy princes who have impeccable timing and chemistry, but what makes it all work is that the 3 villains go for broke just as much in roles that we have never seen them play before. Spacey is in the most familiar territory, but Farrell and Aniston are far out of what we're used to seeing. And what puts this for me above other recent comedies that are close to being as funny, like, say, Bad Teacher, is that the situations may be far-fetched, but based on the decisions made, everything could actually happen, and everybody has real-world consequences for their actions. It was my number 3 movie of 2011, and it is an A. Now, Joe, I'm very curious as to why it was your number 1, but first I want to go to Justin, because why I ran this movie is because with Horrible Bosses 2 coming up, Justin had wanted to give a rewatch to this film because he gave it, in my opinion, a completely ridiculous grade upon the first viewing. So Justin, I guess maybe even before we get to your review, I want to sort of know what your issues with it were on the first watch, and if they are still there, or if they've dissipated more after you've watched it again.
Well, this is actually a very good segue into my review, because I originally talked about this.
Okay.
When it came out in 2011, I was just sort of getting to understand some of the more stylistic components of film. At the time, it was more or less basing on personal enjoyment and whether or not I had a good time watching it. After, obviously, getting more...
Wait,
About the same.
pause right there. Did you not have a good time watching Horrible Bosses?
Dun, dun,
At the time, not really.
What? Alright, listeners, this is why I always say Justin is way too hard on comedy, but continue.
Yes, I did laugh a little bit when I watched it, but I didn't think it was amazing. On second go-round, when I've obviously been a lot older, wiser, and have some general idea of how things work in film, and how you structure a story that it makes sense, I have a lot more appreciation for it.
Okay.
And how it comes together as a whole. Like you mentioned, the real-world consequences bits are actually really interesting, and I think it honestly helps complement the overall storyline. My biggest issue is I really like Jason Bateman's character, and I really like the antagonist of Kevin Spacey. And while I do think that Colin Farrell and Jennifer Aniston are a lot of fun, particularly Aniston, because it's so completely outside of every other generic romantic comedy role she's had, their characters just don't seem quite as... They just don't seem quite as relatable, I would say.
Okay.
They're fun. I enjoy them, but they don't quite gel the same way. And I think Bateman also has a lot more range than Day and Sudeikis. But honestly, their comedic timing, as you mentioned, is completely spot on. Their interactions with Jamie Foxx, with said vulgar named character, definitely got better on repeat viewings. And the story is just... There's so many quotable lines that really help this come together. We've seen workplace comedies like this before, but it's done in such a fresh new way here. I gotta give it a lot of credit where credit's due on the second go-around, and I jump it all the way up to a B+.
That is a much more acceptable grade for this movie. Did you watch it by yourself when you first saw it?
I did not.
Really? Okay. I thought maybe that was part of it.
Nope.
Joe, let's hear from you. This was your number one, which I was very happy to hear about.
Well, ironically, I don't really have anything to add.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Really, like, you guys pretty much said everything. I mean, I echo Dan. I mean, the fact that it is a really ridiculous scenario, but it runs with it. It has full concept of identity, and there's, of course, great timing, great chemistry between the leads, relatable situations, though. But it's all believable, and the characters do suffer consequences for their actions.
It's my favorite thing about it, really.
Like, it doesn't go off the rails and say, okay, they even think to themselves, maybe we shouldn't do this, but then it still backfires, and you could see it being strangely believable. It's kind of one of the few examples of, the truth is stranger than fiction sometimes, really, and that's one of the beautiful things about comedy. You can play with that. And I saw this one a couple years ago, and it was a while after it came out. I think I watched it on DVD in 2012, actually. And I just remember being blown away by it. I just had a great time with it. And I hadn't seen it since then. And really, it held up just as good, maybe even better on the second time. Because I believe I watched it maybe by myself or with one other person. But just seeing it again, it just really had this great impact for me. I think it's probably my favorite Bateman movie. Actually.
Yeah, I would say so.
Like, I think he's probably my favorite character because it's still very him, but it just works so well in contrast to the other guys. I do see, though, where Justin's coming from a little bit with the relationship between Sudeikis and Day's characters and their respective villains. Like, we don't get quite as much time with them, so there isn't as much tension there between them. Like, we see... It's not as strong as in comparison to Spacey's, because Bateman's character is the main one,
right?
So we understand his plight more. That's why I think it is more satisfying. So I can kind of see that.
And I would say Spacey's probably the worst of all of them.
Yes. Oh, yeah. But since that's the center story and they're really supporting stories, I can kind of forgive that. Though I do think that Aniston steals the show the most, though.
She's just... I mean, we're used to seeing her not only as Rachel on Friends, but like Justin said, 10, 12, 15 romantic comedies where she's not really very much outside her wheelhouse.
She's the nice girl next door, wholesome, well-do, kind of like misunderstood.
Right, and she did The Good Girl, which was, a more dramatic role for her. But still, girl next door, very pleasant, and this is just completely off the rails for her. And we saw a little taste of it last year in We're the Millers as well. But this is, where it started. And I'm excited to see what they're going to do with her character, because her storyline is basically done. but obviously she comes back in the second one.
Spacey comes back too.
Well, Spacey's in jail, so yeah, I don't think he has a huge role.
I think it's gonna be like a cameo.
I think it's a little cameo, kind of like Rob Riggle, coming back in Jump Street 2. Mm-hmm. They go visit him at the prison and talk to him. Hilarity ensues.
Must be an important plot point though if they seek his help. Think about it.
You would think. I think it is funny, though, Justin, that you said that Jason Bateman probably has the most range. He really plays himself in pretty much everything.
That's what I thought was weird. The
character here is not really any different from Michael Bluth.
Maybe he fits well in different contexts. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, probably.
He really does play more or less the same
Which
guy.
I'm fine with, because his sense of humor is, it's right up my alley. I love everything he does, pretty much.
That kind of deadpan.
I would say, in Juno, he was a little different.
Yeah.
He's done a little different thing, but where it's like, just go for it comedy, he's typically the same, I would say.
He's actually just a really funny straight man. It's really what he is.
Yeah, he is. That is kind of his role.
He's almost completely reactionary, but he's really good at that.
Yeah. Well, and, the way he can wring laughs from just, the simplest of lines,
Oh, come on, guys. Really? Is that really a good idea?
Right.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Or the cops, pull him over at the bar and say, "Oh, your car ran through a red light," and he just, "Oh, I don't know why it would do that." It's just a stupid throwaway line, but his delivery, punches it up and makes it funny.
I don't win a lot.
Yeah, I don't win a lot with the drag racing. Yeah, this was my 5th time through, and still holds up. Very quotable. And just a rip-roaring good time, I would say. Justin, I am glad that you saw the light on this movie. All right, well, let's close with maybe in a different direction with our Oscar-nominated film, and that is Anna. This is a 1987 film with one sole nomination, and it was for Best Actress, Sally Kirkland. And Justin's going to tell us about it.
Anna, played by Sally Kirkland, was once a famous film star in Czechoslovakia until being exiled to America, where she struggles to find work, occasionally getting help from her sometime lover, Daniel, played by Robert Fields. Though after deciding to take in Christina, played by Paulina Porizkova, who has just arrived from Czechoslovakia and doesn't speak a word of English, she gets treated to a promising acting career, as Anna continues her struggle. Whereas Dan likes to get on my case for being too hard on family films and comedies, I tend to do this. I tend to do the same on the more stylistically driven films in our weekly dockets. However, there's still the need of telling a story in filmmaking, and that's where Anna flies off the rails and never quite recovers. It starts off like a character study about an aging actress, which, for the 10 to 20 minutes devoted to it, are actually interesting. Then it becomes a story about a seemingly clueless actress who looks up to Anna, which kind of is interesting. And between all this is a bizarre commentary on the entertainment business that can only be described as if Woody Allen had directed all that jazz. The problem is, the film doesn't know what to do with all of these, and essentially decides to cram all three together and hope that it gets off the ground. It doesn't. At all. While I found the cinematography unique at times and the music choice haunting, the tonal changes and just awkward narrative progression are clumsy and weak. In terms of performances, it starts out tolerable, and there honestly are a few promising monologues delivered throughout, but the result stands as probably one of my biggest issues with experimental filmmaking. It either works or it doesn't. And with Anna, it's the latter, and I give it a D.
I'd say your worst Oscar pick. You've never given an F.
I think you might be right about that, actually.
Accidental Tourist was probably a D as well, but
I believe it was a D+, but yeah.
Worse than The Accidental Tourist.
Well, at least that had Gina Davis.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, sometimes the Academy has a rough year of options. I don't know what else might have been a better choice for Best Actress in 1987, other than the ones that already got nods, like Glenn Close and the winner Cher. But the pickings must have been slim to nominate anything about this movie. It has glimmers of promise, like Justin mentioned, especially in the beginning, but the more we go down the rabbit hole with Anna, the more lost we get. The acting is rough, the story not compelling, and the whole movie is basically pointless. It's easily one of our worst Oscar entries. It's a D from me as well. Joe?
Once again, kind of having a hard time following you guys. Anna, I just, the first thing I typed was, I don't really know. This movie is trying to say something about Czechoslovakia or acting or identity. Not sure, but it bounces around about 10 different storylines and leaving its characters seeming pretty petty and stupid. With the exception of a few kind of clever scenes through shots, cinematography, and some of the funny lines with the stage acting at the beginning. I really did think that was genuinely funny in a quirky Woody Allen sort of way. But really, this movie plays out like a really bad soap opera. I give it a D as well.
Yeah, it's terrible. And, it sort of is reminiscent in its basic story of All About Eve. The younger actors, the older actors. It's like, obviously that's a much better film. So why are we even trying with these, terrible actors, a bizarre script? I wish that the movie had been about those directors at the beginning.
No, if the whole
at least that would have been funny.
Yeah.
If it followed more like All That Jazz, focusing around the stage itself and maybe utilizing that to have its characters around it,
right?
That could have worked because you could have fit in the struggle with the older actress and teaching the younger actress and taking her stage.
Kind of Black Swan-ish.
Black Swan, and then maybe even still work in the difficulty with coming to America with the Czech thing.
Right.
Maybe it's reflecting a Czechoslovakian story. You could have had a commentary about Broadway and stage and transition.
And even immigration, for that matter.
Immigration. You could have used that as your focal point. Don't leave the stage.
Right.
Don't go to the apartment. Don't go to the restaurant. It doesn't need to happen.
Right.
Just keep
Stay
it
on
focused.
the stage. You're right.
You can do a lot, but just have that one focal
point.
Keep
it contained.
Keep your narrative focused around that one area. Probably would have been more successful.
Yeah.
That was the strongest component.
Oh, by a mile.
So, the first...
And the fact that it was in the first 10 minutes... And then,
and then
see it again, honestly.
Actually, quick decline from there.
Yeah, we really rarely see the stage after that, and by then it's not even real performances. It's people complaining and
whining,
arguing, whining, and it's just not even acting.
Right. Yeah, and Paulina Porskova at the time was a big swimsuit model on Sports Illustrated. We were trying to think of a model that is a decent actress, and we couldn't.
There aren't many.
There aren't many.
Yeah.
I mean...
There's some who got better, but...
I thought Kate Upton was fine, and Other Woman, I know, Justin, you hated her more than life itself, but...
Well, she's better than this chick.
She was way better than Paulina Porskova.
Well, considering the fact they do most of her stuff as voiceover over pictures, I think that says something.
Yeah,
and even the voiceover is pretty bland and monotonous.
Monotone.
Yeah.
Like, I have so much emotion. I'm sad. I'm angry. You wouldn't know unless I was actually saying that I was sad or angry. Because I'm a robot.
Because I'm a robot.
I'm not even really a model. I'm just like a doll.
Not a good entry into the Oscar pool.
No.
And Joe, why is it you hate the Academy so much?
Because they felt this one was worthy of being nominated, but so many other movies are not.
Yeah.
Like Cloud Atlas.
Really, I'm pretty sure. I'm not an expert on 87, but RoboCop came out that year.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, I was a kid in 87, but Three Amigos. Nominate somebody from that.
Somebody did something. You know that there's something about...
Spaceballs. Anything.
Yeah,
Were we that desperate?
Think
about it. It's like, you're telling me that of all the movies, you thought this actress was good enough to be nominated? And what if she... See, when I think about a nomination, I know that sometimes it's supposed to be a nod, but I think a nomination is... This person could win.
Right.
This person is in line to win. That means that this movie, this actress, could potentially have won Best Actress.
If that happened over Cher or Glenn Close, I think Meryl Streep was also up that year for something. She's Silkwood, maybe. Are you kidding me?
She's in the running. That's what I'm saying. She's in the running.
Can't even be in the same breath with those people.
I just think that maybe they liked something about it thematically at the time. I don't know.
Another great Oscar movie to wrap up the show.
It's kind of
Can't get much worse than that.
Well, I know.
The thing is, theoretically...
Sometimes I hate wrapping up with the Oscars.
The thing is, theoretically, the Oscars are supposed to be the best, right?
Right. Cream of the crop. Our best in the triple feature was Horrible Bosses. By a mile.
Think about that.
Really. All right. Well, that is going to do it for this week. You can follow us on Facebook, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, or on Twitter, @Film Fanatics Pod. Our 5-word reviews are posted weekly. in both areas. And of course, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We just picked up a few new subscribers, so if you're one of them, we certainly appreciate that. And that is it for this week. We'll see you back here next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.